Good morning. Today is Wednesday, December 20th, 2023. What I want to share with you this morning is not about Matthew Perry. Matthew Perry was a gifted actor, best known for his role on the hit TV show Friends. I also thought that he was a great dramatic actor, especially on West Wing for a time. And he died this past October 28th. I don't know anything about Matthew Perry's personal life or why he died, and I have nothing to say about that. But I want to focus on an essay that was written by Patti Davis, the daughter of former United States President Ronald Reagan. And she wrote this article in the New York Times in the aftermath of Perry's death. I don't know if Patti Davis knew Matthew Perry, and I'm really just focusing on the article that Patti Davis wrote on the occasion of Perry's death. And the article that Patti Davis writes is about her struggles with drug addiction. And she writes that her memories of the long years of her struggle, her memories were prompted by Perry's death. But let's start this morning with Yosef. There's a famous and difficult question, we've discussed this before, in these Torah portions, starting in last week's portion, the beginning of this week's Torah portion. And that is, once Yosef is brought out of prison and made the second most powerful person in Egypt, why didn't he contact his father? Now, Yosef had no way of knowing that his brothers had told their father Yaakov about what had happened to Yosef. They told him that he was killed. They certainly did not tell him the truth, obviously, that they had sold him as a slave to Egypt. So Yosef is the favorite son. Didn't he realize what his continued silence must be doing to his father? The continued pain and suffering his father was going through? Initially, as a slave to Potiphar, and then as a prisoner, well, perhaps he was unable to communicate freely. But once he was free and powerful, how could he not contact his father? There are many answers, but I want to share one answer from Rabbi Yoel Bin Nun, a very important Jewish teacher and scholar living in Israel today. And it is an answer that has particular relevance for us today. Yosef is sold by his brothers into slavery. He becomes a slave in Egypt, then a prisoner. For years, he sits alone. No friends, no family. Our rabbis tell us he was in prison for 12 years. His mind endlessly rehashing what happened, what brought him to this state. And alone, in the dark, suffering, our anxiety overwhelms us. And we start to question and fear everything. Why hasn't Yaakov come looking for me? Why hasn't my father come looking for me? He didn't know, of course, that Yaakov was told that Yosef was dead. Why did Yaakov all those years ago send me alone at the age of 17 to go find my brothers while they were shepherding their flock somewhere? Didn't Yaakov realize how jealous of me they were? Didn't he realize how much they hated me and how much danger my father was putting me into by sending me on this mission? Or perhaps Yaakov speculated, alone in the middle of the night. Yaakov did know. Perhaps Yaakov was part of the plot. Perhaps his brothers had convinced Yaakov that Yosef was too arrogant, too spoiled, and the family would just be better off without him. Yosef did not contact his father Yaakov even when he was able to, because he feared that Yaakov wanted him dead, or at least gone. Now, we know, of course, that that is not only false, but preposterous. But that's what happens with fear and anxiety and loneliness in the dark. We imagine the unimaginable. This fear, this anxiety ate away at Yosef even when he was free. Even when he was married and had a son, the Torah told us that when Yosef had a son, Vayikra Yosef es Shem HaBachar, Yosef gave the name to his firstborn son, Menashe. He will have a second son, Ephraim. But the name Menashe was given, Ki nashani Elokim es kol amoli ve'es beis avi. God helped me forget all my suffering and helped me forget my father's house, because it was too painful to remember. It was too horrific to consider what he thought his brothers, and especially his father, had done to him. So much so that even when his brothers appear searching for food, and he recognizes them though they don't recognize him, he expresses no mercy, no compassion, though they and their families at home, including his father Yaakov, are starving because of the famine. He treats them harshly, with a bitterness built up over more than 20 years of festering suspicion and hate and loneliness. Patti Davis writes, "A long time ago, I lay awake for hours, terrified that they would be my last ones on earth. I had committed myself to quitting cocaine. Earlier on that black night, I'd careened back into the familiar land of white lines on a mirror. I was certain I would not survive the night." She writes, "I want to tell you something about addiction. No matter who it is or what substance that person is hooked on, loneliness is at its root. That loneliness resides deep inside us. No matter how many people try to help us, it never entirely goes away. Something happens when we discover a drug or alcohol or some other addiction, suddenly we have a companion holding our hand. It's there for us in the empty hours when it seems no one else is. Now here she quotes Matthew Perry, who was speaking at a festival in this past April. Matthew Perry said, "No one wanted to be famous more than me." But he added, "Fame does not do what you think it's going to do. It doesn't penetrate that loneliness." Back to Patti Davis, she writes, "I was 16 when I discovered amphetamines, and I felt as if I had met my best friend. To understand an addict," and again, this is any kind of addiction, "you need to appreciate that companionship, that need to reach for what won't judge you, but will instead seem to transform you into who you wish you were." Yosef was not an addict, but for years he likewise was tormented by loneliness, and it distorted his thinking dramatically. Until in our Torah portion, the Parsha Vayigash, Yehuda is standing with his other brothers, including his youngest brother, Binyamin. Binyamin, of course, is Yosef's only full brother. They share both a father and a mother, both born to Rachel. Their father is Yaakov. All the other brothers were half-brothers, born to other mothers. And Yehuda says these words at the beginning of our Torah portion, "Vayomer avdecha avi oleinu." Yehuda reports to this person he doesn't know as Yosef, but second in command in Egypt. He says, "We went back home after the last time we were here, and our father said to us," Yaakov said to us, "You know my wife bore me 2 sons, Rachel. His wife Rachel bore him 2 sons. One was taken from me, killed. I will live the rest of my life in agony." Yehuda says these words to Yosef, not having any idea the impact on Yosef these words would have. But at that moment, when Yosef hears those words, he realizes 2 things. Number 1, Yehuda and the other brothers would sacrifice themselves to protect their brother, his brother Binyamin, which is a complete transformation from how they treated him all those years ago. And number 2, at that moment, Yosef realizes his father never abandoned him, certainly never caused or even wished him harm, but suffered as Yosef suffered every moment they were apart for all of those years. And that is the moment when Yosef finally says to them, "Ani Yosef, I am Yosef, I am your brother Yosef. Ha'od avichai, is our father still alive?" Maybe that means to say, it is amazing that our father is still alive after all of the pain and suffering he has gone through, just like what I have gone through. But Yosef could not have done that even a moment earlier until he heard those words from Yehuda. Because the loneliness he had experienced had distorted his thinking. Thank God I have never experienced anything remotely comparable to this in my life. I am blessed that I am not alone, that I am well, thank God. But even for me, when I am up in the middle of the night by myself, which happens very frequently, sometimes I can't stop my mind from running to the most horrible scenarios, which in the daytime I know are unreal. But at night, alone, we can and often imagine the worst. And then I think to myself, what might it be like at this moment for someone who is really alone? Someone who is really sick? Someone who is really insecure about their food or their shelter? For too many of us, too many of those around us are truly suffering. No less than Yosef suffered all of those dark years. Emile Zola, the great French novelist, once wrote, "We are like books. Most people only see our cover. The minority read only the introduction. Many people believe the critics. Few will know our content." But here's the amazing thing. I cannot cure addiction, though I can be and I am an ally and a resource and support to those who are experiencing addiction of various kinds. I cannot prevent suicide, though again I try to be an ally and a friend and a resource and a support to those people who have this terrible challenge. But I can, and you can, help someone else feel that they are not alone, which is often at the root of addiction and suicide. And it's so easy. It just takes a phone call, a text, a FaceTime chat once in a while. Especially now, as the nights are long and cold here in Montreal, and with many people away here in Montreal, and many of us all over the world fearful and anxious about the war in Israel, about anti-Semitism right here and around the world, in addition to whatever else is going on in their lives, you and I can help. So I say to you, as I say to me, try it. Spend 5 minutes a day. That's all. 5 minutes a day. Calling someone who is alone, who may be having a harder time than you can even imagine. But without exaggeration, you can save someone. And you will also save yourself. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.